receive your reign. We receive your reign. We receive your reign. So set a fire down in my soul that I can't contain, can't control. One more of you, God.
Take over all things. We just ask it in Jesus' name this morning. Amen. Amen. All right, good morning. It's a beautiful day out there, isn't it? That sunshine, that big yellow thing in the sky. Haven't seen that in a while. I think it's the sun. I think. It's a star of some sort. But, man, it was beautiful to see that this morning. Pardon me if my arm feels like it's going to fall off because our snowblower decided to not work perfectly yesterday, so I held a snow blower or a leaf blower and blew out almost the entire driveway and then shoveled the rest. So holding that blower, I didn't realize how much that was going to hurt until this morning when I started moving that elbow, and I was like, ow, it was a little painful, but that's okay. So this morning we're going to be in the book of Acts. Chapter 23 we're up to. Now, I have good news and bad news for you about Acts chapter 23. Here's the bad news. There is no great spiritual truth to be revealed in Acts chapter 23. Nothing hidden in there, like, oh, yeah, but this is what he's really saying. Nope, none of that's in Acts 23. But there's an even more important lesson. Here's the good news. There's a more important lesson that we can learn from Acts chapter 23. It's this idea of what we call providence. And that's important that we know what providence means before we get into this. Providence is God's manipulating the natural kind of in our everyday lives. He's taking care of stuff behind the scenes. He's knitting everything together into this divine, beautiful piece of artwork that we don't even know. And I bet you every single person in here probably has a story about, well, it just so happened that this happened, and then it just so happened that that happened, and all of a sudden you look back at it later on and you're like, I see where God knit all that together. It's not the miraculous. That's totally different. That's where God takes the natural and goes, ha ha ha, you natural, whatever. And he makes it supernatural. That's the miraculous. We're talking about providence, the everyday stuff. I always like to tell the story of my teaching job that I got in Dowagiac. It just so happened that Guy, near pass, married Missy, and Missy happened to know people in Dowagiac schools, and she happened to hear that just so happened, just so happened. That's providence, okay? Just so happened that she let me know that, oh, I think there's a math teacher job at the high school, because at the time I was teaching in Waterville, 7th grade, there's a math teacher job open at the high school in Dowagiac. And I was like, okay, so we were camping at the time. So on my phone, I got online, and I was like, oh, well, this deadline, passed 2 weeks ago. But I was like, why not? Throw my hat in the ring. It was 2 weeks past the deadline, and sure enough, I got a call, and they said, hey, can you come up like in the next hour? We'll interview you. Mind you, we're camping in northern Indiana, so all I have is shorts, and I'm dirty, I got smoke, and I told them, I said, hey, this is how I'm going to come. They said, okay, that's fine. And I go up, I interview, and before I walk out the door, they're like, hey, we want you to come teach for us. Just so happened that all those things went together. Just so happened. No, you look back on it and you go, man, God put this person here and this person here, and he put me over here, and he made my phone work because sometimes you don't get reception and all, and he put in my mind, hey, it's 2 weeks late. Go ahead and put your application in anyway. It just so happened. And we're going to see that Paul, our good old buddy Paul here in Acts 23, a lot of Acts 23 is going to be just that, looking at God's providence. It just so happens that. So there's not this great big spiritual thing to learn, but we get to see the cool part of God knitting all of this together. So let's start here in chapter 23. There's another place in the Bible where God specifically shows his providence. Take a look at the book of Esther. God's name's not mentioned once. What? Oh, go read it if you don't believe me. It's not mentioned once, but it's all the situation around Esther. Good old Queen Esther. All right, so here we go. I can't talk. Acts chapter 23 and verse 1. Actually, no. Let's back it up. Let's back it up to where we left Paul. So let's go to Acts 22 and verse 30. This is where Jesse left off last week. It's where we left Paul. It says, the next day, because he wanted to know for certain why he was accused by the Jews, he released him from his bonds and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear and brought Paul down and set him before them. Now remember who they're talking about here. They're talking about Claudius Lysias, the commander, the one in charge. He's trying to figure out, what do these crazy people have against Paul? Little old Paul. He ain't done nothing. And so what he did is he said, okay, we're going to release him from his bonds. Now why? You remember what Jesse said? Why did they release him from his bonds? Because they were going to beat him senseless. Why? What card did he pull out? The Roman citizenship card. Don't leave home without it. Don't leave home without that card. It gets you into all kinds of places. And Paul said, hey, I'm a Roman citizen. Don't you dare touch me. So Claudius was trying to figure out, okay, well, what's going on? So he said, all the chief priests and all their council, that's the Sanhedrin. You remember the Sanhedrin? They're the ones that convene to convict Jesus. Yeah, that same Sanhedrin. Okay? But they used to meet in a certain location. This guy said, Claudius said, I'm going to have all them come to me. They don't get to meet in their normal, regular place. 71 guys on the Sanhedrin. 70 regular ones plus the chief priest. Okay? They brought Paul down and set them before him. All right, now we get to Acts 23, verse 1. So we're back in the know here of where Paul was. He's now standing in front of the Sanhedrin, but not in their particular court. And Paul looked earnestly at the council. Now, earnestly is another word for intently. So Paul got up there in front of the council and went, silence makes you kind of nervous, doesn't it? Like, where's he going? He's got to say something. Paul just stared him down. Like, All right, guys, here we are. Here we are. He looked intently at them. And he said, men and brethren, remember that, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. This is Paul speaking. First of all, when you go to address the Sanhedrin, you don't address them as men and brethren. If you remember when Peter went before them, he addressed them as elders, men of high esteem. Like, you better pay your respect where respect is due. But Paul, no, he says men and brethren. Why on earth did he start with men and brethren? Remember what Paul was. He was a Pharisee. He was one of them at one point in time. So he thought, oh, it's just us getting together. Men and brethren, you're with me. Some of you are just men, but others you are brothers. Let's chit-chat here. He said, men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. Now, how on earth could Paul say that? How on earth? Remember what Paul used to do? He used to go around killing the Christians. So how can he say, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day? Who's saying this? It's Paul. It's not Saul. As Paul, he said, you know what? I got nothing to hide from God. I've done everything out in the open. I'm doing exactly what God has told me to do. But even if he was speaking as Saul, remember, his convictions were to uphold the law. So even as Saul, to kill the Christians, he was doing what in his mind, in his conscience, was right before God. So when he said this, he wasn't lying. He wasn't making stuff up. In his conscience, I'm good to go. And that's what he told them. Until we get to verse 2. Look what happens now in verse 2. And the high priest Ananias, now be careful, that's not the same as Annas, who was earlier in Acts. It's also not the same Ananias, the husband of Sapphira. Not the same one. Other people were named Ananias, so we got to make sure we don't get that confused. Okay? The high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. So he said, I've done nothing wrong in front of God. Smack that boy in the mouth. Punch him. Give him a good one. Right on the old cheek. And guess what? They did. Just because he says, I haven't done anything wrong against God. Now, think about that. This is the chief priest. This is a Roman citizen. What did he just tell him to do? Exactly what Claudius said, it ain't going to happen. He's a Roman citizen. Now, what did Jesus say to do when you get smacked on the cheek? Oh, you hit me over here? Hey, give me this one. Let's see what Paul does. Verse 3. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall, for you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? Paul didn't turn the other cheek. He blasted back at him. You know what? We're supposed to turn the other cheek, but I guarantee you, if somebody comes up to you and smacks you upside the head, punches you one right in the jaw, I'm going to probably react. I bet you we all probably would, to some extent. But Paul said, God will strike you. You hit me, God's going to hit you. Ha ha! Love it when that happens. God's going to take care of it. Then he says, you whitewashed wall. Oh my goodness. A whitewashed wall. Now, you might be wondering, why did Paul use those words? Let's take a look at Matthew chapter 23. Verse 27. This is Jesus speaking. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanliness. See, Paul has heard the teachings of Jesus. He's heard what Jesus has said. Not directly, he heard it from stories. So Paul's natural action was same as Jesus's. He says, oh, you look all pretty. You're like a whitewashed wall. You whitewashed walls. You look good on the outside, but inside, nothing. Ay, 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 ay. Let's go back to verse 3. You whitewashed wall, you sit to judge me according to the law. And do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? He's addressing the high priest of the Sanhedrin Council. He's like, you're a hypocrite, dude. You look good on the outside, nothing on the inside. You're going to judge me according to the law, but you hit me against what the law says to do? You're not supposed to touch me till I have a fair trial. And that's what this is supposed to be. So he was calling him out. Verse 4. And those who stood by said, do you revile God's high priest? Verse 5. Then Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler for your people. Oh, wait. This now sounds all kinds of weird. Because Paul said, wait, you guys are yelling at me because this is the high priest? Paul says, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest. Now, there's a couple of different reasons why he may not know. You get to pick which one you like. Okay? One possible reason is that because they weren't meeting in the normal place, they had to travel down, go to a different place. Perhaps the high priest was not dressed in all his flowery stuff. So he looked just like everybody else. That's one possibility. Okay? Second possibility, Paul was being sarcastic. Paul's saying, oh, I did not know, brethren, that this guy, Ananias, was the high priest. I didn't know that. Here's the reason why that's plausible, a reason why that could be. Because Ananias was a very corrupt high priest. Josephus, who recorded a whole bunch of stuff in history, recorded all about this guy. He would take the tithes that came in from the regular priests, and he would take them for himself. And anybody who tried to come up against him and say, that ain't right, he'd have him either imprisoned or he'd have him killed. This guy was a creep. So it's possible that Paul was calling him out again. We're like, oh, I didn't realize you, of all people, could be the high priest. So if you like that option, you can take that option. Here's option 3. Probably the most plausible of all of them. Paul didn't have good eyesight by this time. Not because of when he was blind and the scales came off and all of that. But remember, he's been stoned a couple of different times. And if you remember, as he was writing the books, or the letters to the different churches, he said, look with what large letters I write. We talked about that before, because his sight was not so good. So it's very possible everything was kind of blurry, and he couldn't really see who was talking. All 3 of those things kind of would make sense. Maybe it was a combination. But notice what Paul did. Right away, he admits, oh man, I goofed up. And he apologizes. He says, I didn't realize he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have done that. He didn't wait and say, oh, maybe when I get home tonight I'll apologize. He apologized in public, right there in front of everybody. All right, let's go to verse 6. Even more important, now we start to see God's working. But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, there's another reason why when he perceived that some were Sadducees and some were Pharisees, perceived, in other words, he didn't see it, that's another kind of backing up for the idea of maybe his eyesight wasn't the best. But how do you think he perceived it? That's God working in the background. He's like, hey, let me tell you a little something here. You got half of the room is Pharisees and half the room is Sadducees. So when Paul perceived that, he cried out in the council, men and brethren, notice he addressed them again even after he apologized, the way he addressed them. He says, I myself am a Pharisee. And half of the room probably went, if you ever watched The Chosen, sorry, that escaped me just a second, and when John the Baptist comes out and goes, yeah, it's probably what they did. He says, I myself am a Pharisee. And they probably, half the room went, yes, he's a Pharisee, yes, just like us. The son of a Pharisee. Not only was I a Pharisee, my daddy was a Pharisee. And he probably went on to, and my dad's dad was a Pharisee, and so forth. Okay, come from a line of Pharisees. Concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am being judged. Why is that so important? What's the difference between a Pharisee and a Sadducee? The Pharisees believe absolutely everything. Spirit, resurrection, all of the Bible, the entire Old Testament that they had at the time. They believed all of that. The Sadducees only believed the first 5 books, the Pentateuch. They're kind of like the liberals. They didn't believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in angels. Pharisees did. So Paul, getting knowledge from God, he now announces, hey, I'm a Pharisee with you. I believe in this. And remember, Paul had given his testimony that Jesus himself came to him in a vision. So the Pharisees are like, I see nothing wrong with what's happening here. The Sadducees are like, y'all are crazy. This is blasphemy. None of this stuff's true. So now Paul has created a division in the Sanhedrin. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Here we go, verse 7. And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. Verse 8. For Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, no angel, no spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. Verse 9. Then there arose a loud outcry, and the scribes of the Pharisees' party arose and protested, saying, we find no evil in this man. But if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God. So the Pharisees said, hey, if he says Jesus himself came and talked to him, who are we to fight that? The Sadducees are saying, this is stupid. That can't happen. All the time, Claudius is sitting back there going, so why are you guys so upset with this guy? And now he's got half of them agreeing with him, saying there's nothing wrong with this guy, and the other half saying we want to kill him. Claudius is probably getting a little upset at this point. Like, what do I do with this guy? Do I believe them? Do I believe them? I got to find something out. I got to find something out. Verse 10. Now, when there arose a great dissension, the commander, Claudius, fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him back into the barracks. So Claudius said, if this continues the way these guys are fighting, this guy's going to die. And Claudius already said, I can't beat him, and if he dies on my watch, that's going to be on me. So he says, nope, let's bring him back into the cell. Take him back into the cell. So when Paul gets back into the cell, at this point, he's probably thinking to himself, yeah, this isn't exactly working out for me. But at least I'm not dead. My mouth hurts because I got smacked, but at least I'm not dead. So I can still preach about Jesus. So we get to verse 11. The following night, wait a second, the following night. So that means it was already at night. So Paul came back, was in the prison cell all that night, all the next day until the following night. And he's probably super discouraged. But look who shows up. The following night, the Lord stood by him. Wouldn't you love to have the Lord stand by you? Is there anything better than that? To be in prison and have the Lord stand by you. Paul's going, hey, I got this. I got the Lord standing by me. And even better, the Lord says, be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome. This is where Acts starts coming together, and you start seeing where this was all woven together. What was Paul's original destination? Where did he want to go? He wanted to go to Rome. And everybody told him, don't go there. Don't go there. Don't go there. Paul's like, but I want to go to Rome. I want to go to Rome. Jesus is now verified. He says, dude, he says, you did such a great job here. Guess what? You're going to go to Rome. Exactly what you wanted. I'm sure that Paul probably stood up or jumped up and was like, yeehaw. It's going to be off to Rome I go. I don't know how I'm going to get there because I'm still in these chains. Somebody else was in prison in chains. A guy by the name of Peter. What happened to his chains? Boink! Off. Miracle. God touching the natural and making it supernatural. God's will for Paul was not to get out of the chains. It was to endure. That was God's will. Endure so he could go to Rome and testify about Jesus. But he had to weave all of that together. Here we go. Verse 12. And when it was day, some of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under an oath. Uh-oh. What's the Bible say about doing an oath? Don't do it. It says, don't make yourself any oaths. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Don't make yourself any oaths because then bad things happen. Well, guess what? They bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. Uh-oh. Sounds like a hunger strike. I'm not going to eat or drink until this guy's dead. Well, if God doesn't want him to be dead, you're going to be going a long time without eat or drink. We'll see if you really keep your oath. Now, there were more than 40 who had formed this conspiracy. Remember, there were 70 plus 1, Sanhedrin. None of these guys were the Sanhedrin. These were outside guys who kind of sided with the Sadducees, and I'm sure the Sadducees, it doesn't tell us here, I'm sure the Sadducees kind of got these guys together and were like, hey, we got to do something about this Paul guy. Verse 14. They came to the chief priests and elders and said, we have bound ourselves, and that's how you know they weren't part of the Sanhedrin, because they came to Notice how they're dressed, the chief priests and elders. We have bound ourselves under a great oath that we will not eat nothing. See, now I already lied. Until we have killed Paul. What do you notice is missing there? Drink. So already, we're not going to eat or drink. Oh, hey guys, we're not going to eat until this guy's dead. Later on, they might say, hey, we're not going to have a snack until these guys are dead. Never know. Keeps going backward. That's when you get into trouble with oaths. Here we go, verse 15. Now, you, therefore, together with the council, suggest to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow as though you were going to make further inquiries concerning him, but we are ready to kill him before he comes near. In other words, they're setting up an ambush. For those of you who are old enough, remember when Lee Harvey Oswald was being transferred from one place to another, he was ambushed. That's what they're setting up. They're saying, oh, as you transfer Paul from his cell back down to the court, we're going to be waiting. We're going to take him out, and we don't have to worry about him anymore. Before he comes near to it. So when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Now hang on here. Where did these people come from? We didn't know anything about Paul's family except for his dad was a Pharisee. We just saw that. We know nothing else about Paul or his family. All of a sudden, now we know something. He's got a sister. It just so happens that he's got a sister. Hear it? Hear the providence? And it just so happens that his sister has a son, also known as a nephew in our world. It's Paul's nephew. Just so happens. And it just so happens that the nephew heard of the ambush. What on earth was he doing in the courtroom? It just so happened that he was there. Now, this is Keith speaking. I don't know this because I didn't read it. Here's what I think. Because Paul was a studier of the law, my guess is that the nephew would also be a studier of the law. So he would hang out near the law places to hear what was going on, to take notes, and to study. So he was probably there because he had been there many, many times. But God wove it around so he was there at that particular time. Providence. So he heard it. Verse 17. Then Paul called one of the centurions to him. And he said, take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him. Anything strike you weird about that? What is Paul? He's a prisoner. He calls a centurion, a person who is over 100 men. That's why they're called a centurion. The word century, 100 years. Okay? Centurion, they're over 100 men. Calls the centurion and says, hey, take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him. He didn't ask him. He said, hey, take this kid, take him to the commander, he's got something to tell him. How on earth does Paul get away with that? You don't get away with that. If you're a prisoner, you don't call over the guard and say, yo, I got something I need you to do. Unless, don't leave home without it, that Roman citizen card. If you're a Roman citizen, you get to do exactly what he did. You get to tell the guard, hey, I got something I need you to do. It just so happened that he had his Roman citizen card. Providence, weaving it together. Here we go. Verse 18. So he took him and brought him to the commander. Again, remember, Claudius, that's who he's taking him to. Paul, the prisoner, called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you. Now, it says young man. I don't know how old he was. I'm going to venture a guess to say he was probably younger than Mateo. He probably maybe was 11, maybe 12. We'll give him that benefit of the doubt. A young man in those days. And if you've ever seen an 11 or 12-year-old boy who has something to tell you, it's usually not, well, see, I got something to tell you. It's usually like, hey, man, I got something to tell you, man. You want to hear this? You want to hear this today? Come on, you want to hear it? But he's going to the commander, the guy in charge. So he was probably like, I got something to tell you, man, but you stay over there. We'll be good. So what did he do? He calmed him down. He says he took him, brought him to the commander. He said, something to say to you. Next one. The commander took him by the hand. He said, come here, boy. Let's come over here. Let's chit-chat. Let's talk. He went aside and asked privately, what is it that you have to tell me? Nobody else was around. Commander, nephew. That's it. And the nephew spilled his guts. And he said, the Jews have agreed to ask that you bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more fully about him. 21. But do not yield to them, for more than 40 of them lie in wait for him. Men who have bound themselves by an oath that they will neither eat nor drink. He heard them say it the first time. They will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for the promise from you. All Claudius has to do is say, okay, I'll send him down tomorrow. And that's going to be the end of Paul. But watch what happens. 22. So the commander let the young man depart and commanded him, tell nobody that you told me about this. Don't tell anybody you told me. Keep it a secret. It's our little secret. We're good. Verse 23. He, being Claudius now, called for 2 centurions. 2 centurions, saying, prepare 200 soldiers. I smell a battle. 70 horsemen. We're at 270 now. And 200 spearmen. That's javelin throwers. We're now talking 470 men for little old Paul. 470. Remember, Paul was kind of, you can't really call him a midget, but he was small. He wasn't big in stature, and he was kind of getting feeble. He had been stoned a few times, so everything probably wasn't working 100%. We think that his eyesight was not so good. And yet 470 soldiers are going to protect him. But watch how even more cool this becomes. They're going to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night. That's 9 o'clock at night. So in other words, 470 are going to escort this one to go to Caesarea from where they're at now, about 65 miles. That's from Coloma to Battle Creek. They're going to walk it. Not really. They're going to get on horses. But they're going to leave at 9 o'clock at night, under the cover of darkness. How many other times in the Bible have we seen people get spared under the cover of darkness? It just so happens, he said, send them out at night. It just so happened those many people were there available and ready to go. So they're going to go to Caesarea. Verse 24. And provide mounts to set Paul on. Because Paul couldn't walk very well. Mounts meaning a horse. So you're going to get a horse. That way he can get there easier. And bring him safely to Felix the governor. They're going to take him to Caesarea. Now, what is so important? They're currently in Jerusalem. They're going to Caesarea. Who is in Jerusalem? Think of the word Jerusalem. You'll hear the word in it. Jews. Caesarea is the Gentiles. So Claudius was saying, I'm going to get you out of the land of the Jewish people, and I'm going to send you down to the Gentiles, because that's who you've been talking to anyway, and they all seem to like you. It's your own Jewish people who are trying to kill you here. And 470 of you are going to escort him. Get out of Dodge. Here we go, verse 25. He wrote a letter in the following manner. So again, this is Claudius, okay? He's going to write a letter to the governor. Let's see what the letter says. Claudius Lysias, now be careful. We're used to writing letters with to whom it is written to first, and then we sign it at the end. Back in the day, they did it backwards. Who wrote it comes first, and then who it's going to is later. So Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. So he's letting Felix know this dude's a Roman citizen. He's got his Roman citizen card. Never leave home without it. Here we go. And when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, here we go. Everything we said is true. He's trying to figure out why do they hate his guts. I brought him before their council. So I did what I was supposed to do. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. I find nothing evil in this man. Nothing. Here we go. And then it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man. I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Ta-ta. Farewell. What did Claudius really do? He kicked the can down the road. He said, I can't figure out what they want to do with him. I don't know what to do with him. He's a Roman citizen. He's got the right to be heard by the governor. I'm going to send him to you. Let you take care of it. See ya. Okay. So now he's got somebody else woven into the tapestry. Here we go, verse 31. Then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. Now, this is actually about the halfway point. So don't think that, wait a second, they said they were going to Caesarea, and they didn't take him there. Nope, that's the halfway point. It's like a stopping point, okay, where they had to rest a little bit because horses got to get water and all that crazy stuff, okay? So they took him to Antipatris in 32. The next day, they left the horsemen to go on with him and return to the barracks. So not everybody went the entire trip. Some of them, so they all went to the halfway point, and then they kind of split. Took him down. Here we go, verse 33. When they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, so the governor's reading the letter, okay, farewell. They also presented Paul to him. So they brought Paul. Here we go, 34. And when the governor had read it, he asked what province he was from. Why would the governor do that? He wanted to make sure he had his Roman citizen card. So where'd you come from? Oh, I came from Tarsus. Oh yeah, Roman citizen. Remember, it was Saul of Tarsus. And when he understood that, he was from Cilicia. So Tarsus was the city. Cilicia was kind of like the state, if you want to think of it that way. So it wasn't that it was, the wrong thing. Here we go, verse 35. He said, I will hear you. Because as the governor, Roman citizen has a right to be heard all the way up to the governor. Governor gets to make the last say. Just so happens that's where Paul was. Providence. And I will hear you when your accusers have also come. Who were the accusers? The Jews, the Sanhedrin. So now Felix is going to tell the Sanhedrin, y'all want to convene? You're going to have to come convene down here. Once you all get here, we'll have ourselves a big old trial. And I'll hear both sides, and I'll figure out what's going on. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. So, in the cell. Just so happens, it's the exact same cell that Peter was in. And this is what I always loved to do when I used to do junior church. And next time, we're leaving Paul here. We're kind of hanging here. What's going on with Paul? Next time, we're going to find out what happens to Paul in front of Felix. Unless you want to cheat and read ahead. Aha. Always love to leave you hanging. But notice, no big spiritual conquest here. No big spiritual idea. No great truth. Other than you can totally see how God wove everything together and is weaving everything together. Luke, who wrote this, is basically a storyteller. And he's just doing the narrative of what happened. He's not making stuff up. He said, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. And write it all down. So the next time you're thinking, well, it just so happened, think again. A lot of times we always ask for miracles. Peter got a miracle. Paul got providence. So if you're asking for a miracle and you don't see it, wait. Wait. Because you're probably going to be able to look back and you're going to be able to see providence. Oh, it just so happened that I had a snow day that day and the school burned down. Oh, whole lot of providence. It just so happened I was late to work, but the car, 3 cars in front of me, got hit in the side by a semi-truck. See, when you think God's not in control of things, he's in control of all things. He's knitting stuff together. He's knitting stuff together for us. He's knitting stuff together for you individually, us as a congregation, as a church. And he's telling us it's not always going to be a miracle. I don't always work in miracles. Sometimes you just got to wait as he weaves everything together. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for today. Father, we thank you for the word that you gave to us. Father, we thank you for your providence.